Welcome back. There's a brand new poll out. It shows President Obama losing support from a key group of supporters. Take a look at this. Mr. Obama's approval rating with liberals dropping below 80% for the very first time, dipping from 88 a week before the midterms to 79% now. Let's bring in our political panel. Matt Schlapp, the former White House political director under President George W. Bush. David Mercer joins us, a Democratic strategist. And gentlemen, good to see you both. David,
good to see you, Greg.
For the last couple of years, President Obama has certainly demonized the Bush-era tax cuts, but there he was on Friday. I think we have videotape of this. He's signing the extension into law happily, extolling the virtues of this great legislation, and standing next to him, two Republican leaders who fought for it. And conspicuously absent, David, the two Democratic leaders in Congress, Reid and Pelosi. Did that moment symbolize the reason why some liberals are jumping ship?
You'd have to go further into the polls, but let me tell you what my opinion or take on it is, and that is Pelosi and Reid were tending to the business of the people back in Congress during that signing. And with regard to them being Bush-era tax cuts, let's be clear again to the audience, Greg, that when it came down to these tax cuts, President Obama was very clear that we should be extending those tax cuts to the middle class. It was the Republicans that pushed it into the bill to subsidize or the further surpluses that millionaires and billionaires have in extending their tax cut, but did so for only 2 years, not for 10 years or not permanently. So they're going to have to revisit that come 2012. But let's be clear that he did push forward what he thought was best for 98% of the country, which was to give them that middle-class tax cut.
I know Pelosi and Reid are busy, but I've never met a politician who wouldn't walk a mile for a camera. Matt, let me turn to you. You know, those who are tempted to write the definitive liberal obituary now are probably going to be premature. Yesterday, one of their signature clauses, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, was passed by Congress, fulfilling, obviously, one of President Obama's campaign promises. Would you expect his approval rating, therefore, among the liberal base to now go back up?
I think we're going to swing. I think was that to Matt or to me?
It's to Matt.
Sorry about that.
Hang on, David.
Sure.
I think that these numbers with his base supporters or liberal voters, they're going to take some time to come back. I think there's no question as we get into presidential politics as this year goes on that liberals will see Barack Obama in much the same light they saw him before. But clearly it shows you the delicate walk presidents have to take. In order to be reelected president, President Obama is going to have to get a majority of those independent voters who have viewed his policies as being too radical. At the same time, he has to mend fences with the Nancy Pelosi's and the Harry Reids and all the liberal activists across the country in order to put that coalition back together. I think it's an open question now whether he's going to be able to do it.
David, the New York Post, which is owned by our parent company News Corp, wrote an editorial the other day entitled Dems Deflated Dreams. And here's a quote from it. Put it up on the screen. Scarcely 2 years ago, the Democratic Party was in the driver's seat. What happened? Obamacare, for one thing. Sure, it became law, but not before enraging the swath of America between the west bank of the Hudson River and the Pacific Coast Ranges. So, in a way, do liberals maybe have themselves to blame for pushing an entitlement program that most Americans don't like, don't want?
No, listen, we're going to push for the envelope in fighting on behalf of the American working family. And let me just say that, you know, we're looking at making economic points, and we're being led by President Obama to focus on scoring those economic points and not these political points. And if we're going to talk political points, you can go and look at Congress with a 13% approval rating. They got some work to do, both Democrats and Republicans. And if you look at the recent news that came out yesterday with regard to Sarah Palin, a likely GOP nominee for the presidency, you know, 60% of the public won't even consider her as a likely nominee.
I'm glad you
so
brought up
they got to worry about those numbers,
data.
But we'll worry about the economic points we need to score.
Matt, there's a new Washington Post poll that found that the recent election was not at all a broad mandate for the Republicans and their plans, but instead it found that it was a vote against the status quo. Indeed, it found that the public trusts President Obama more than they trust congressional Republicans to deal with the country's problems. Why don't they trust your party, the GOP?
Well, let's face it, Republicans won in this last election because the American people wanted an alternative to these Obama-Pelosi policies. Republicans are making a mistake if they think that they're the most beautiful person at the dance. We still have to earn trust back from the voters. I think we're in great shape to do that with Speaker-designate Boehner and the people we have coming into Congress. But there's no question the Republicans have to every day earn the trust of the American people. But if you look at it, stimulus, health care, the cap-and-trade attempts that the president had.
Right.
I mean, this left the people very concerned over his policies.
All right, Matt Schlapp and David Mercer, good to see you both this Sunday. Thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure. Happy holidays.